There we go. Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and in this video we are talking about, I guess it's episode 8 of The Last of Us. Oh, yes. Now, I vaguely remember what happens in the game. Vaguely. It's been a while since I watched the playthrough of it, but I've got the game, gotta do a playthrough myself. But, point is, I kind of had a feeling of what was coming. So now, in this episode, we have Joe and Ellie clinging to the edge of life. Well, Joe clinging to the edge of life, and Ellie walking through it with him. She just finished sewing him up in the previous episode. So, she's rationing out the food. She's rationing out any liquid they have. She basically is taking some drops and putting it to his lips, trying to keep some water on him. But I mean, he's so much of a lack of consciousness with him at this point that there's not a lot she can really do but just keep trying. And she looks over at the gun and decides, okay, she's going to do something. So she takes the gun out. Well, before she does, she gives the horse some sustenance so it can stay alive. But she takes the gun out and she decides she's going hunting. She sees something. I think it's just a rabbit in the distance because we're still in the midst of winter. Everything's covered in snow. And it's hard to tell what it is, but it looks like she spotted a hare, some kind of rabbit. Nothing really big, but you can just tell it's a white creature moved about in the snow. And it takes off, and she decides she's trying to chase it down, and she just trips and falls face first in the snow. So she gets up. She's like, so she keeps out hunting though. And the comes across this deer. She does what Joe taught her when firing a rifle. Calm down, breathe, steady shot. And she nails it. You can see that it kind of buck almost fall over and it takes off. So you can see its blood, which first thing I thought of is track the blood in the prints. You'll find it. Because that's the way a deer does when you nail it well. If you nail it heart and lungs, just, yeah. Um, it'll try to run away, but it's bleeding, and eventually it's going to just its body's going to give up, you know, give out. So, well, the next thing we see is after we've seen the little spots of blood in the snow, two hunters have followed the blood to the body of the deer she shot. And they are contemplating taking the deer. But Ellie tells them, stop, put your weapons down, turn around, face me. And so she discusses, she's telling him, says, now go, get out of here. It's like, and the one guy who turns out to be the leader of this village, he goes, just give me 10 seconds. I want it. She's like, I won't say it again. He says, just, all right, I understand. Just give me 10 seconds. And um, he offers medicine for half the deer. Tells his friend to go back to the village and get 2 bottles of penicillin and a syringe. Earlier in the episode, I forgot to mention this because we don't necessarily start out with Joel and Ellie. We start out at this village. The guy who's the leader. He's preaching. He's reading from the Bible because they are at the service of this one person. After the service, everyone's filed out. The leader talks to his friend. He's like, how much do we have left? In reference to the food they've got. And it's like, it's not going to last us but about a week. So they decide to go hunt. That's how we get to where Joe or Ellie and these guys meet. They talk, and he tries to be real plain and very calm sounding and everything. He drags the deer to this empty house, and it's a house that's already fallen apart, but it gives them some shelter, and they start a fire in the middle to kind of keep them sheltered from the cold and snow, at least a little bit. So turns out the guy has kind of figured it out, this village leader, but he knows it has to be the little girl from reports he got of a man who killed one of the 4 men he sent out scavenging. Yeah, turns out in the previous episode, the man that swung at Joe with the baseball bat and then drove the hilt of the bat into Joe was the guy that was from this village that was killed. He's like, and I know there was a little girl with him. His friend is back at this point, and he has his gun trained on Ellie, and the guy's like, put your gun down. Give her the medicine. She's kind of scared at this point. So she takes that medicine. She forgets all about the deer. She heads off. They take the deer with them back to their village. Ellie tries to use the penicillin on Joe. The people at the village explain, yes, we believe it is the same people. And this teenage girl who's supposed to be like the daughter of the one guy who was murdered speaks out, says, you should kill them both because, she's still in grief and everything. And the guy just kind of sighs, takes off his gloves, walks over to her. He's real calm at this point, and then he just gives her a backhand, knocks her down. Then he kneels down, offers her a hand, helps her back up. You know, and then they all end up sitting down to eat. Which, yeah, um, we'll come back to this, but there's something about that we want to talk about. Anyway, he and five other guys, all with guns, decide they're going to go out the next day and finish this. Now, the preacher guy, the leader, he's wanting to bring Ellie back, but they can go ahead and serve justice on Joel for murdering their compatriot. You know. Now, um, Ellie tries to protect Joe. She closes the door leading downstairs to where he's at, puts a big dresser or something in front of the door to try to block it. And then before she does all this, she places a knife in his hands. And he's just like half dazed and everything. He's not responding or anything. He just barely opens his eyes. But she tries to lead them away. Gets on the horse, gets their attention by firing at them, and uh, heads off on her horse. And finally, the one guy, he waits, takes aim, and as she's heading around the side, nails the horse. Horse goes down. She's thrown. And, there's like three or four guys there, and they're just about ready to kill her because the one guy says, "Go ahead and do it." And the guy who shot the horse, he, you know, uh, I guess, unshell. Anyway, he kicks the empty shell out, recocks the gun, and he aims it. And, but the preacher stops him by firing in the air. He's like, "No." He picks up Ellie. He says, "Two of you come with me. You all drag the horse." And he's holding Ellie in his arms because she's just passed out. He says, "The rest of you, if you want justice so bad, search the houses. If you find them, kill them." So she's taken by the guy to the village while the other three guys are searching for Joe. At first, we see one guy. Joe can hear him upstairs walking around. His eyes kind of open a bit and he's listening. He's still having trouble breathing. He's like, then he hears him moving something heavy. So the next thing we see, the guy's coming downstairs, looking around for Joe with his gun. He's being real cautious, looking around. Joe's not laying on the mattress like he normally would. So Joe's up and about. But the guy's like, he doesn't see anybody. He comes around this corner and, he's not finding anybody. Next thing you know, Joe jumps up behind him and he's got that knife. And apparently he just plunges it in his neck. Because the guy's sitting there, he's trying to fight it back. He's like, they both fall over and the guy's kind of gurgling. So, and eventually you just see the blood in his mouth pouring out. And he kind of just stops. So yeah. But you can tell Joe is not at 100%. He's still struggling. I mean, my goodness, the guy has only had maybe 3-4 days of rest, couple of shots of penicillin. Yeah, minimal liquid and food. Don't know how, but he somehow manages to catch the guy off guard, kill him. Next thing you know, he's captured the other two. He has one with, looks like he's got duct tape around his feet and around his body, and he's leaned up against the wall. He's like, come on, man. The other one, he's got taped to a chair. And he basically tortures and interrogates him at the same time. He takes his knife and he stabs it in the leg of the one guy. And says, where is she? Forces him to show him by sticking the hilt of the knife, the handle, in the guy's mouth. Yeah. And he says, I want you to show me where we are and where your place is. The guy does one, then he does two. He's like, there. And Joe's looking at the map. And then he looks at the guy and he plunges the knife into his gut, killing him. He leaves the knife there and he looks at the guy behind him. He's like, come on, man. He told you. Why are you doing this? He's like, before he told the guy he just killed that, and then it better be the same that your friend shows me as well. And the guy who's just duct tape sitting against the wall, he's like, I ain't going to tell you anything now. Anything. Joe grabs a lead pipe and he's like, it's okay. I believe him. And he just basically beats the guy to death. So yeah, back to pure vengeance and violence. Joel. Ellie and the preacher. Ellie's locked in a cage. The preacher is trying to interrogate her. Doesn't really get much of anything. He comes back with food and he's explaining to her, I see a lot in myself in you. We're both uh, leaders, selfless, and violent. You're a violent person. I know if I give you that knife and let you out, you would go right at me with it. Because, she's shown nothing but violence. But he talks about all this while being in this very calm voice and everything. And he explains, I want somebody like me. I'm a shepherd with nothing but sheep. I want a friend. And he's trying to act like, oh, I'm just being friendly. And he puts his hand on the bar, and Ellie kind of comes close, and she puts her hand on the bar. He moves his hand to on top of hers. And it acts like he's getting through to her. Then she puts her other hand on top of him, and acts like that's happening. Then she takes his finger and goes, but then of course he getting rid of her by pulling his arm back through the thing and putting her face directly into the bars several times. So I don't know if it's that he's broke her nose or just done some severe damage to it, but she's bleeding, so. And so he leaves and he says, we'll see what happens next. Meanwhile, Joe has found the village. He's next to this one building. He takes the butt of the rifle, smacks at this big padlock on the door, breaks it open, and goes inside. He looks around, and in the front room, it's pretty clear it's some kind of slaughterhouse, some kind of butchery, because you can see the animal pelts and everything. And he notices doors to some rooms further back, so he goes on in. He walks through there. And then he comes upon it. There is 3 human bodies hanging from the ceiling, headless. Yes, turns out this little village, to sustain themselves, used a bit of cannibalism. So yeah, the preacher explains it to Ellie. He says, because Ellie asks if he's going to chop her into little pieces because she sees a human ear in another cell with blood around it. Yeah. Which, from what I remember of the game, the cannibalism thing played like a much bigger part of the episode. In the TV series here, it's just kind of because he's like, you don't think it didn't shame me to have to do this? But they depend on me. I have to keep them fed. But yeah, he brings his friend into this room where Ellie Cell is, and carrying a butcher. He's carrying a butcher knife, and they're getting ready to slaughter her. They pull her out of the cage. She's fighting back, and apparently she bites the one preacher man. And they get her and take her and put her on the table, and they're getting ready to chop her to kill her, and she's like, I'm infected. And they stop for a moment. And she goes, now you are too. Puts the butcher knife, goes by her head, so so he can look at her arm, because she told him, says, check my arm if you don't believe me. He checks her arm. He and his friend are like, he's like, she should have turned already. And his friend goes, I don't know, man. That looks real to me. While they're discussing this, all of a sudden she moves so quick. She's like, takes the. I cannot think of the name of the knife. It's not really a butcher knife. It's the big square blade. Oh goodness. It's essentially a chopper, though. She takes it and right into the friend's neck, and he falls over. Uh, and then she gets out and runs. The preacher has the knife, has a gun with him. And it's a little pistol, and he fires a couple of shots. But yeah, she gets out into the building, and it turns out it's a restaurant is where she was being kept. But yeah, they get into a big battle. Well, a game of cat and mouse, I should say. She's hiding, trying not to get caught. Uh, she ends up taking a piece of wood that was used. Stomach was used to heat stuff because it still had embers in it. It was still semi burning, and when she gets the opportunity, she throws it at him, misses, but it hits the corner and sets a curtain on fire, which starts the great reaction of the whole building catching fire while all this is going on. She is able to sneak into another room, get a knife, and she attacks him, gets a good shot in on him, apparently, because he's bleeding from the side at that point, but he's like knocked her down. And all this is still happening while the place is alight. And it's almost a feeling as if the guy is going to try to violate her sexually. He's like, if, you know, both of us are going to go, he's going to do what he wants. So he's on top of her, straddling her, holding both hands over her head. But she's like trying to reach out because she sees the knife, but he's like staring at her and he's like, but he says something about love. That's why I get the feeling that it's, yeah. But anyway, she somehow gets him off from off top of her, has the knife and takes it out, and then finally gets on top of him, and she's just stabbing, 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 stabbing. There's got to be about dozen or 15 different times she just goes crazy, stabbing them to death. Because it's just out of anger and hurt and everything else. There's, yeah. She goes outside, finally, after she gets up, walks out. Someone grabs her from behind. Turns out it's Joe. He's like, no, 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 no. He tries to turn her around and she's like crying. She's, ah! You try to hit him. And finally, even after looking at him for a moment, she's, you know, and he's like, easy, easy. He puts his coat over her and holds on to her as they walk out of the town. It is a just well done episode. Keeps up with the momentum, the fantastic storytelling the series has had thus far. But yeah, but I think in this series, in this episode, Joe finally comes to see Ellie more as a person than just cargo. Sees her almost as a surrogate daughter. He cares. So yeah. Um, in the original part, in the original game, I think this part of the series was much longer. I don't know. I want to seem to remember in my mind, but maybe I'm misremembering. It has been a while since I've watched it played. Um, but I remember that the whole group is supposed to be cannibals and everything. So yeah, it doesn't play as big a part in the TV series though. It's kind of just a mention, a notification. Oh, okay. But yeah, early in the series, I mean, at the very beginning, they're supposed to be doing this service for the guy that Joe kills. The girl that the guy who was killed, uh, supposed to be his daughter, she asks, "When are we going to bury him?" And the preacher guy, the kind of leader of that town, he goes, the ground is too hard right now. The ground is still frozen. We can't really dig anywhere. It'll be in the spring. So I'm wondering if they're not eating him since, I mean, he's dead. They need the food. The guy says only a few people know, myself and only a few others. He mentions that at one point. He's like, what am I supposed to do? Let them starve? Ellie tells him, yeah, you let them starve. But, yeah, yeah. It's, it's a good episode. Like I said, it stays up there. The one thing I'm kind of curious of is, again, I felt like this part of the game lasted much longer than just this, than compared to the TV series. Because even in the TV series, it only feels like it should have been just a matter of days because it connects directly with the previous, where Joe and Ellie get ambushed at that college. So I don't know. Again, maybe I'm misremembering and everything, but yeah. I like it. Well done. The next episode, they said, though, will be the final episode for season one. Which, again, if you played the game, you know what happens. I'm not going to tell you yet. We won't mention that until after this final episode for season one. But yeah, I'm kind of wondering how they'll do that one. It'll probably be a lengthy one, but it'll be interesting. It will be interesting what they choose to do. Anyway, this video is already almost 40 minutes, but I just want to say I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.